Imagine a world where the person you thought you could trust with your deepest secrets, the one you believed would never hurt you, betrays you in the most unimaginable way. What would you do? A respected leader, someone who wore the badge with pride, someone who commanded respect, had an affair that would not only ruin his family, but lead to something far worse. But the real question is, how far was he willing to go to protect the secrets he so carefully tried to hide? How much of his humanity could he sacrifice for the woman he thought he loved? A well-respected man who, in the eyes of his community, seemed untouchable. Commissioner Andre Williams had everything: charisma, leadership, respect, and most importantly, trust. For years, he was the pillar of his neighborhood, the one people turned to for guidance and support. His reputation was solid, built through years of hard work and dedication. To many, he was a symbol of authority and respect, someone who upheld the law with a strict sense of duty. But behind closed doors, things weren't as they seemed. For all the respect he commanded in his professional life, there were cracks forming in his personal world. And it all began with a young girl, a troubled soul, lost in the chaos of her own life, who sought solace in the arms of someone who could offer her a sense of control. Her name was Tamara, just 17, a teenager from a rough background, with an unpredictable life that often spiraled beyond her control. Tamara had no real family support, no one to lean on except the adults who'd failed to guide her properly. Her need for affection led her into the arms of someone far older, someone who, at first, seemed to offer guidance, but would soon lead her down a much darker path. As the months passed, the affair between Commissioner Andre Williams and Tamara deepened, though it remained hidden in the shadows. What started as a seemingly innocent connection, a man reaching out to help a troubled young girl, slowly morphed into something far darker. Andre, a man revered by the community, had placed his trust in someone who was far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. Tamara, still a teenager, played a delicate game. She was manipulative, calculating, and while she appeared to be looking for guidance, what she truly sought was control. Control over the commissioner, and eventually over the lives of everyone involved. The affair wasn't just about passion, it was about power. Tamara, with her troubled past and her inability to find stability anywhere, latched on to the only source of authority she could control. She knew how to play Andre's weaknesses, his ego, his need for validation, and his desperate desire to escape the increasingly tense atmosphere at home. The commissioner, despite his professional success, found himself captivated by Tamara's youth, her vulnerability, and most of all, her willingness to make him feel needed, something his wife had long stopped doing. Meanwhile, his wife, Michelle, was beginning to sense that something was wrong. At first, it was subtle. A missed dinner, an unexplained late night at the office. Andre, once so attentive to her needs, was growing distant, his mind consumed by his secret life. Michelle began noticing the small details. The way he would glance at his phone with a certain nervousness, the frequent hours he spent away from home. It wasn't like him, and she knew it. She couldn't pinpoint the exact cause of her growing unease, but something in her gut told her that her husband was hiding something from her, something that could destroy everything they had built together. As Michelle's suspicions grew, so did the tension at home. She started noticing small inconsistencies. He would return home late, claiming work commitments, but his eyes would dart around, avoiding her gaze. His once warm, loving demeanor had shifted, replaced by a coldness that she couldn't explain. What Michelle didn't know was that the source of this tension wasn't just the affair. It was Tamara's increasing control over Andre, a control that soon began to spill over into the commissioner's personal life. Tamara's influence on Andre was undeniable. She had dug deep into his vulnerabilities and manipulated his sense of guilt, drawing him in further with promises of loyalty and affection. But Tamara had her own secrets. Beneath the sweet, naive exterior, she was a girl with a troubled past, marked by abandonment, neglect, and broken promises. Her troubled history had shaped her into someone who would stop at nothing to get what she wanted. especially when it came to taking power away from those who once controlled her life. As the weeks passed, Andre became her pawn. Her love for him was not genuine, but a carefully planned move to secure her place in his world. She knew exactly how far to push him, and she began to draw the lines of control tighter, manipulating every move he made. But Michelle wasn't the only one noticing the subtle changes. In the tight-knit community where everyone knew everyone, whispers began to spread. People who once trusted Andre started to sense that something was off. Michelle, ever vigilant, began asking questions. She would stop by friends' houses, asking about Andre's whereabouts. She would question the people in the neighborhood, subtly trying to piece together the truth. Each question, however, only deepened the mystery. Her suspicions were growing, but she still didn't know how to confront her husband with the truth. As the affair continued to fester, the tension within the Williams household grew unbearable. Andre, though he may have initially believed he could control the situation, was now trapped. Tamara had woven herself too tightly into his life, and Michelle was growing more and more suspicious. What had started as an affair to escape his crumbling marriage had now become a monster of its own, a secret he could no longer contain. The pressure was mounting, and soon, the fragile boundaries between loyalty and betrayal would collapse entirely, setting the stage for a tragedy that would devastate the entire community. The day everything changed began like any other, but it would soon spiral into chaos that no one in the small, tight-knit community could have predicted. It was the morning of the double murder. Police had just been called to the Williams family home after a neighbor reported hearing strange noises in the early hours of the morning. What they found when they arrived would forever alter the lives of those involved and shake the very foundation of the community itself. Inside, the horror was unimaginable. Michelle Williams, Andre's wife, and her close friend Angela, a woman who had known the family for years, were discovered dead. Their bodies, cold and lifeless, were found in the living room, evidence of a violent struggle before their lives were brutally taken. Blood was splattered across the walls, a grotesque sign of the terror they had endured in their final moments. The air was thick with the smell of violence, of lives suddenly extinguished in a place that was once home. The discovery was nothing short of shocking. The house, once filled with the warmth of family, was now the scene of a grotesque crime. Investigators swarmed the area, taking photos, documenting every detail, trying to piece together the clues that would explain the deaths. The bodies were covered with sheets, but it was clear that whoever had committed this act had done so with precision and cruelty. The commissioner's betrayal had now manifested in the worst way possible, and the truth was beginning to unravel. As the police began their investigation, they quickly realized that this wasn't a random act of violence. No, this was personal. The sheer brutality of the crime suggested someone who knew the victims intimately. It became clear that the killings were tied directly to the commissioner, but the question was, who had pulled the trigger and why? Was the commissioner involved in the murders, or was he a victim of his own infidelity? The answers were far more complicated than anyone could have anticipated. As the pieces fell into place, the role of Tamara, the young girl, began to emerge from the shadows. At first, it seemed like a possibility too chilling to be true. Could she have been the mastermind? Was she the one who orchestrated the murders in a fit of jealousy, in an attempt to take control of the commissioner's life once and for all? Or was she, in fact, just a pawn in a much larger, much darker scheme, a victim of her own manipulation and twisted emotions? The investigation took a surprising turn when it was revealed that Tamara had been at the scene the night of the murders. Her fingerprints were found on a weapon, but the evidence was inconclusive. Had she pulled the trigger, or had she merely been an accomplice? The detectives were left grappling with this chilling uncertainty. Some believed that she was a cold-blooded killer, a young woman who had planned the deaths with cunning precision. Others argued that she was a victim herself, a young girl trapped in a world she couldn't control, pushed to the edge by her own desperation and unrelenting emotional turmoil. The twists kept coming, and with each revelation, the story grew more complicated. Andre, who had always been so sure of his ability to control his life and his actions, now found himself caught in the web of his own making. His once perfect world had collapsed into a nightmare. And yet, even as the investigators worked tirelessly to unravel the case, Andre remained silent. His role in the deaths of his wife and best friend was unclear, but his involvement in their tragic end seemed undeniable. Was he simply an unwilling accomplice, or had he been the one to drive the fatal act forward? His refusal to cooperate only deepened the mystery, leaving everyone involved with more questions than answers. And then, as the investigation reached its peak, a stunning revelation came to light. The truth behind the killings wasn't as simple as a jealous lover or a vengeful young girl. It was far more complex and far more disturbing. In a final twist, it was discovered that someone else had been pulling the strings all along, a third party whose involvement had gone unnoticed until the very end. The real mastermind behind the murder, it seemed, had been hiding in plain sight all along. As the investigation into the double murder unfolds, what initially appeared to be a straightforward case of betrayal quickly grows more complicated. Detectives start to dig deeper into the life of Commissioner Andre Williams, whose actions up until now had seemed unassailable. But the more they investigate, the clearer it becomes. Everything he had told them was a lie. What had initially been presented as a tragic moment of infidelity now looked like a carefully constructed web of deception. At first, the commissioner had seemed like a grieving husband, a man who had lost everything he loved. But as the weeks went by, inconsistencies in his story began to surface. There were lies about his whereabouts the night of the murders. His timeline kept shifting, and what seemed like an innocent misstep quickly became a glaring red flag. The commissioner had claimed to be home when the murders occurred, but his alibi didn't hold up under scrutiny. He was caught in a lie that seemed too significant to overlook. The detectives, relentless in their pursuit of the truth, began to expose a series of small but telling contradictions. Phone records showed calls to someone other than his wife late in the night. The security footage from his home, something that had once seemed like a simple everyday detail, now revealed his presence in areas of the house where he claimed not to be. Each piece of evidence chipped away at the commissioner's credibility until his story had crumbled entirely. As these lies unraveled, the investigation took a darker turn. The more the detectives uncovered, the more the entire case began to seem like something far more sinister. This wasn't just about a man's infidelity. This was about power, control, and a betrayal that went deeper than anyone could have imagined. But the impact of the crime went far beyond the commissioner's lies and the investigation itself. The ripple effect in the community was profound. Andre Williams, once the epitome of trust and respect in the neighborhood, became a symbol of betrayal and deceit. The African-American community that had once looked up to him now found themselves divided. They had trusted this man, respected him, and now they were forced to confront the ugly truth. The very person they had admired had been living a double life. Neighbors, friends, and family members began to speak out. Rumors spread like wildfire, and many who had once been close to the commissioner now found themselves questioning everything they had known about him. How could a man, once so revered, be capable of such a brutal act? The community was torn between their loyalty to Andre and the growing evidence that pointed to his involvement in the deaths of his wife and friend. The investigation hit a pivotal moment when new evidence was uncovered. Something so surprising that it threatened to change the direction of the entire case. A crucial piece of evidence came from an unexpected source, a letter. A note, written by Andre's wife, Michelle, was found in the commissioner's office. The letter detailed Michelle's growing suspicions about her husband's relationship with the young girl, Tamara. It was a chilling revelation, showing that Michelle had known about the affair all along, and her fear had been escalating in the days leading up to her death. This letter not only confirmed Michelle's suspicions, but it also suggested something even more sinister. It hinted at a plan, a possible confrontation between Michelle and Tamara. The letter implied that Michelle had been planning to expose the affair and possibly confront Tamara directly. It seemed that she had become desperate, perhaps fearing the fallout from the affair, or worse, its eventual public exposure. The discovery of the letter painted a new picture, one in which Michelle might have been on the verge of taking drastic action to protect her family, making her death even more tragic and complicated. And then, just as the investigation seemed to stall, a breakthrough came from an unexpected confession. One of the neighbors, who had once been a close friend of the Williams family, came forward with startling information. This person had witnessed a heated argument between Andre and Tamara the night before the murders. The neighbor's testimony was damning, suggesting that the argument had escalated to a point where violence seemed inevitable. It wasn't just an affair anymore. It was a fight for control, a fight for survival. This confession gave detectives the missing piece they had been searching for, but it also deepened the mystery surrounding Tamara's role in the murders. Was she simply a victim of the commissioner's manipulations, or had she played a more active role in the murders, taking things into her own hands when things went too far? The detectives now found themselves tangled in a web of lies, confessions, and startling revelations, unsure who the real perpetrator was, or if there was more than one person involved in the deaths. Every step forward seemed to lead to more questions. What had really happened the night of the murders? Was there a plan in place all along, or had it been a crime of passion, a moment of desperation that had spiraled completely out of control? Just when it seemed that the investigation had reached its breaking point, with the evidence mounting and suspicions of the commissioner's guilt overwhelming, an unexpected twist shook the entire case to its core. A new witness, one no one had expected to come forward, emerged from the shadows, casting doubt on everything the detectives thought they knew. This witness, a long-forgotten associate of the commissioner, had been silent for months. But now, they were ready to talk, and their testimony would prove to be the key that unlocked the darkest corners of the story. The detective team, already stretched thin with the complexities of the case, gathered around as this mysterious figure laid bare a shocking new angle, one that nobody had anticipated. It seemed that the motive behind the double murder was far more intricate than anyone had imagined. What had initially seemed like a crime born out of passion, betrayal, and jealousy suddenly appeared to have far deeper roots. The new witness revealed that the commissioner had been involved in activities that nobody had suspected, criminal enterprises that had stretched back years, long before his rise to power in the community. This wasn't just about a messy affair anymore. This was about something darker, something far more dangerous. The commissioner's relationship with Tamara, his young lover, had been built on more than just lust or affection. It was a web of manipulation, deceit, and power. Tamara, a troubled girl with her own troubled history, had been caught in the crossfire of his ambition, used as both a pawn and a weapon in a deadly game of control. The new witness also dropped a bombshell, a series of hidden documents, financial records, and off-the-record communications suggested that the commissioner had been running a covert operation that was both illegal and high stakes. These activities, though carefully hidden from the public eye, had deepened his debts and made him vulnerable to dangerous people who were willing to do anything to silence those who stood in their way. And then came the most shocking revelation of all. There was evidence suggesting that the double murder might have been an act of revenge, not just against Michelle, the commissioner's wife, but against anyone who stood in the way of his carefully laid plans. The murder of the commissioner's wife and her close confidant wasn't just an affair gone wrong. It was a calculated move, orchestrated by forces far beyond simple jealousy or betrayal. Was this a desperate attempt to cover up something far more sinister? The detectives were now facing an entirely different case. What they had thought to be an emotional crime of passion was turning into something much more complex. Revenge, criminal connections, and the commissioner's dark secrets were all coming into play, and no one could predict how far this twisted web would stretch. As the case wound its way through the legal system, the entire community held its breath, watching the trial unfold. The courtroom, once a place for the pursuit of justice, became the stage for a drama that would leave scars long after the final verdict was rendered. The once respected commissioner, Andre Williams, now found himself at the center of a case that seemed to capture the very heart of betrayal, ambition, and shattered trust. The trial was nothing short of a spectacle, with the weight of 2 lives lost. The courtroom was filled with emotions as the defense and prosecution presented their arguments. The community had waited for answers, but the trial was filled with unexpected revelations that kept them on the edge of their seats. Each piece of evidence, each testimony, chipped away at the commissioner's once immaculate reputation. Witnesses took the stand, recounting the tragic events leading up to the murders. The commissioner's lies began to unravel in front of everyone, and his involvement with Tamara, once a secret affair, became the focal point of a case that seemed to be spiraling out of control. What the defense hoped would be a quick dismissal soon turned into a painstaking battle, with one shocking twist after another. But as the trial reached its dramatic conclusion, the real question remained. Could the community, once united by trust and respect for their local leader, ever heal from the profound betrayal they had witnessed? The families of Michelle and the other victim could never get back what they had lost, no matter the verdict. As the judge announced the decision, the air was thick with anticipation, and the courtroom fell silent, waiting for the answer to the one question that had haunted the entire town. Would Andre Williams face justice for the murders he had orchestrated, or would his position of power shield him from the consequences of his crimes? The final outcome, regardless of the verdict, was a bitter pill for everyone involved. For the victims' families, the grief would never dissipate. For the community, the impact of the crime would echo for generations. And for Andre Williams, the price of his actions was far greater than any court sentence. It was the unraveling of everything he had once stood for, the exposure of a web of lies, manipulation, and unchecked power. As the dust settles, the quiet aftermath of the trial lingers over the community. Justice has been served in the courtroom, but the question remains, at what cost? The people of this once thriving neighborhood, who had placed their faith in a man they once revered, now stand divided. The commissioner, once a symbol of power and trust, is a shadow of his former self. His name now associated with betrayal and bloodshed. But the true cost of this tragedy goes beyond his conviction. For Michelle's family and the other victims' loved ones, justice cannot bring back what was lost. The pain is not easily soothed by a sentence handed down in a courtroom. No matter the outcome, the scars remain deep and unhealable. The promises of the commissioner were broken, and with them, the trust of an entire community was shattered. But perhaps the most haunting question of all is whether justice truly served its purpose here. Was this a case of the law catching up to a man who thought he was untouchable? Or was it simply an attempt to restore a sense of order to a fractured world? For the people who have lived through the story, the answers remain elusive. What if the commissioner had acted differently? What if the affair had remained a secret? Could the lives lost have been saved? Or was this tragedy an inevitable consequence of a life lived in deception? In the aftermath, as the courtroom doors closed and the final gavel fell, the community was left to pick up the pieces. How does a place like this heal after such a violent betrayal of trust? How do the people who once called each other friends, neighbors, and family rebuild when their foundation has been cracked by murder? Can they ever truly move on? Or has this incident forever altered the way they see one another, their leaders, and themselves? This is not just a story of a commissioner and a young girl. It's the story of a community torn apart by secrets and lies, of a town's attempt to come to terms with what was done in its name. It's a reminder that those in power can fall just as easily as they rise, and the consequences of their actions are far-reaching. It's a story that asks the question, who is responsible when those we trust the most betray us in the most horrifying of ways? As the community begins to heal, the faces of those left behind linger in the memory, and the echo of this crime remains in the hearts of those who lived through it. But perhaps the most important question to ask is, what happens when a betrayal is too deep to forgive, and when the wounds of the past can never truly be healed? How does a society move forward after it has been irrevocably changed? As we come to the end of this chilling tale, the story of betrayal, loss, and justice leaves us with many unanswered questions. What would you have done if you had been in the commissioner's shoes? Was the double murder truly the result of his affair, or was there something darker at play behind the scenes? The twists and revelations have left a scar on this community, and only time will tell if healing is possible. But what do you think? What's your theory on how everything unfolded? Was the commissioner's guilt certain, or do you believe there's more to this case than meets the eye? We want to hear from you. Drop your thoughts, theories, and questions in the comments below. We're eager to know what you think. And if you enjoyed this investigation, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and ring the bell so you never miss another compelling true crime story.